Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. Zeke left the observation room, his mind a battlefield of warring loyalties. Rian's words had shaken him to his core, but Concord's grip on him was still strong. He had spent years believing in the regime's vision, defending it, sacrificing for it. Yet now, cracks were forming in the foundation of that belief, and with each passing moment, the choice before him became more impossible. As he walked through the dimly lit corridors of the Concord command center, a sense of foreboding settled over him. The city of Skyhold, divided and on the brink of collapse, mirrored his internal conflict. His comm device vibrated again, but this time it wasn't Rian. It was Commander Delan. Zeke's heart sank as he answered the call. Delan was not a man who tolerated indecision.
"Lieutenant!"
Delan's voice crackled through the speaker.
"I need you in my office immediately."
Zeke nodded to himself, already changing direction. "On my way, sir." Delan's office was as cold and austere as the man himself. The walls were lined with tactical maps of Skyhold, with red markers indicating the sectors under rebel influence. Behind the commander's desk was a large window overlooking the city, much like the observation room Zeke had just left. But here, the view felt oppressive, a constant reminder of Concord's failing control. Delan was waiting for him, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city. When Zeke entered, he didn't turn around. "Lieutenant," Delan began, his voice heavy with authority, "we have a problem." Zeke stood at attention, though every instinct in him was on high alert. "What kind of problem, sir?" Delan finally turned, his icy blue eyes locking onto Zeke's with unnerving intensity. Rourke is becoming more dangerous by the hour. His forces have gained control over Sector 8, and there are reports of defectors from our ranks joining him, but that's not the real issue. Zeke's pulse quickened. He had a bad feeling about where this was going. "We've intercepted a transmission," Delan continued, stepping closer to Zeke. "From Vale." The breath caught in Zeke's throat. He struggled to keep his expression neutral, but the tightening in his chest betrayed his anxiety. Delan didn't miss it. His eyes narrowed. "You seem concerned, Lieutenant." "I wasn't aware of the transmission, sir," Zeke replied carefully, his mind racing. If Concord had intercepted his conversation with Rian, it could mean the end of his career and his life. Delan's lips curled into a thin smile, though there was no warmth in it. "Perhaps not. But we know Vale reached out to someone inside our ranks, someone close to him." Zeke's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he had to tread carefully. "Sir, if you're suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything, Lieutenant," Delan interrupted sharply. "I'm giving you an order. I want Vale dead. No more hesitation, no more games. You will be the one to do it. Do I make myself clear?" Zeke's blood turned cold. Delan was watching him closely, gauging his reaction. This wasn't just an order. It was a test. Concord was suspicious, and now Zeke had no choice but to prove his loyalty. "Yes, sir," Zeke said, his voice tight. "I understand." Delan nodded, satisfied for now. "Good. You leave tomorrow morning. Failure is not an option." Zeke saluted and turned to leave, but as his hand touched the door, Delan's voice stopped him. "One more thing, Lieutenant." Zeke turned back, meeting Delan's steely gaze. "If I even suspect that your loyalty is compromised," Delan said softly, "I will personally see to it that you're executed as a traitor. Do I make myself clear?" Zeke felt a chill run down his spine. "Crystal clear, sir." Back in his quarters, Zeke sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the floor. The weight of Delan's order pressed down on him like a vice. He had known this moment was coming, the point where his loyalty would be tested beyond anything he had ever imagined. But now that it was here, he didn't know if he could go through with it. Kill Rian, his friend, his brother in arms, the man who had saved his life more times than he could count. Could he really do it? Zeke's thoughts spiraled, pulling him deeper into doubt. He could still hear Rian's voice from the transmission, pleading with him to see the truth, to remember who they used to be. But now, Rian was more than just a rebel. He was a symbol of everything Concord wanted to destroy, a threat to the order Zeke had sworn to protect. Yet, in his heart, Zeke knew the real threat wasn't Rian. It was Concord. The regime he had once believed in so blindly was becoming something monstrous, a machine that crushed anyone who dared stand against it. And Zeke was beginning to realize that he was just another cog in that machine. The door to his quarters slid open, and Zeke jumped, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. But it was only Kara, his lieutenant and closest confidant within Concord. "Zeke," she said, her voice low, "we need to talk." Zeke stood, forcing himself to push the turmoil down. "What is it, Kara?" She stepped closer, her expression serious. "The men are restless. Word spreading fast about what happened at the central tower. They're starting to question our mission. Question you." Zeke clenched his jaw. He had known this was coming. Concord's soldiers were trained to follow orders without question, but even they had their limits. The destruction of the central tower, coupled with Rian's growing influence, had sown seeds of doubt. "I'm handling it," Zeke said, though the uncertainty in his own voice betrayed him. Kara studied him for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Are you?" Zeke met her gaze, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that shook him. Doubt. Kara had always been loyal to Concord, but more than that, she had been loyal to Zeke, and now even she was beginning to question him. "You know what Delan ordered," Zeke said, his voice tight. "He wants Rian dead. I'm supposed to be the one to do it." Kara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't seem surprised. "And are you going to?" Zeke turned away, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know. I don't know if I can." Kara's voice softened, and when she spoke again, it was with the tone of someone who had seen too much. "Zeke, we've all made sacrifices for this city, but at some point, we have to ask ourselves if those sacrifices are worth it. Rian might be a rebel, but he's not the enemy. You know that." Zeke clenched his fists. He had spent years trying to shut out that truth, but now it was staring him in the face. "What are you saying, Kara?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying," she replied, stepping closer, "that maybe it's time to stop fighting for Concord. Maybe it's time to fight for something real, for Skyhold, for the people, not for Delan." Zeke's breath caught in his throat. Kara, of all people, was telling him to betray Concord. It was unthinkable, and yet the truth in her words resonated deep within him. He was on the verge of making a decision that would change everything. Before he could respond, his comm device buzzed again. Zeke glanced at the screen and felt his heart drop. It was Lila. She had been quiet since the mission, her distance troubling Zeke more than he liked to admit. He knew Lila was struggling with everything that had happened, Rourke's betrayal, the crumbling alliance between the rebels and Concord. But now, as her name appeared on his comm, Zeke felt a deep sense of foreboding. He answered, "Lila?" Her voice was strained, almost breathless. "Zeke, we need to talk. Now." Zeke glanced at Kara, then back to his comm. "Where are you?" "I'm in Sector 3. There's something you need to know about Rourke. It changes everything." Zeke moved through the dimly lit streets of Sector 3 with a sense of urgency. His mind was racing with questions about Rourke, about Concord, about Lila. What had she discovered? And why did it feel like everything was unraveling around him? When he reached the rendezvous point, he found Lila standing in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. "Lila," Zeke said as he approached, his voice low. "What's going on?" She turned to him, and Zika immediately noticed the trembling in her hands. "Rourke," she whispered. He's not who we thought he was." Zeke's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Lila took a shaky breath, her voice barely holding together. "I overheard him talking with one of his lieutenants. Zeke, Rourke isn't who we think he is."